Better get your finger out, alright, and make sure that you get the fucking results. And if you get the results right and you stick in, I'll come and see you. Alright? I'll take you for a bit of lunch, or I'll come to your house or something, eh? We'll sit down and have a wee chat. Is that alright, mate? So you make sure you stick in, eh? Come on, don't fuck the job up.
Welcome to Silly Wells. This is a mental health podcast. We discuss things that are a little bit on the heavy side, you know? Things that you probably don't want to bring up at 12 p.m. during lunchtime break. You don't want to be like, hey, I'm feeling the worst. Or maybe you do. Who the fuck are we to judge? You know? Just enjoy yourself. But this show is for everyone. It might not be for you, and that is okay. That is very much okay. We're not gonna sit here and judge you from a distance. One, because we can't. Two, I'm tired. And that's a very difficult thing to do when you're tired. Judging people is hard when you are spent so long judging yourself. Okay?
I don't struggle.
Okay? Well, fine, Joe. Fine. Anyway, I'm going to keep saying this. We're in season 2, and the show is like nice and it's flowing well. And we appreciate people listening and people showing support for the show in different ways. We have mental health this week, and before that, I just want to say, before people say, you didn't speak about, the obvious thing that happened this week, we're going to speak about it very quickly right here, right now. Fuck you, Elon Musk, you Nazi piece of shit. So, anything else to say before we start mental health this week, Joe?
No, this is episode 39. We don't know.
Yes,
we've stopped saying that recently. Like, what episode we're on? We're on episode 39. We're on our way to 40.
I don't think you've ever said what episode we were on.
Well, I think we have. I feel like I have a memory of us, because that's why we tried to remember the episode like numbers before, like when we started or like before we started. But recently, we just haven't bothered.
Nah, we don't need to.
Yeah, we don't need to.
Anyway, it's time for mental health this week. Welcome to Mental Health This Week, a section of the show in which we discuss mental health news from, the past week and things from outside the week. But, things that are prevalent to us, to you, to the world this week. I'm going to kick things off with political news. I know I just said fuck Elon Musk, right? But guys, I'm going to take you to something happy from the world of the United States of America. And the reason why I'm saying it's happy is because I believe that we should, I guess not congratulate, not celebrate, but we should look at and maybe take a positive from the fact that the MAGA granny, who was a famous internet figure back in the 2020s for being one of the members of the attempted insurrection on the Capitol on January 6th, refused to accept Donald Trump's pardon for her actions on January 6th. Long story short, effectively, Donald Trump went, hey, I'm in office now, guys, so I'm going to pardon all these people who come from really bad sectors of society, like the Proud Boys, various other neo-Nazi groups, straight up, they're not even neo-Nazis, just straight Nazis, and anyone who decided to storm a government building, he pardoned them all. And a lot of them has been celebrating about it. One of them yelled, freedom, as if, he isn't a sack of shit. But Miss Hemphill has opted to take responsibility and say, hey, I'm not even in prison anymore, but I'm not going to take the pardon. We fucked up. We were in the wrong. We need to learn how to do better and be better. And I'm happy about that. That's it.
Yeah, I didn't know about this. I didn't know much about her apart from what I had learned, apart from obviously when the storm on the Capitol happened. And I knew about this person named the MAGA granny. It was interesting reading over like the stuff that she sort of said about her experience coming out of this, her description of it as being a cult, the fact that she was apparently someone who was involved with like people with, addiction, with substance abuse, I believe it was. A substance abuse counselor, yeah. And that she used to have an addiction to alcohol, and then she really, and that, you know, in kind of over time, she kind of, maybe me and her come from a similar like logic in our minds of like comparing everything to like an addiction to alcohol or something, but that she found her like a relationship with, or not even just her relationship with, but like the ideology itself and how people relate to it, very similarly. Even speaking about the idea of like, it's just like working with an alcoholic. When you're in denial, you get real upset, to the extent of when like she was bringing facts to discussions with like people who, I don't even know what it's called. Like, what do you call it? Like, just the MAGA cult? Like, I don't know what the like framing is even like of like, I don't even know what you would describe this as a group as being, but
Far right cunts.
yeah, I guess there's a specificity to a certain extent, but like, everyone kind of gets where I'm coming from. It's very like Trumpist ideology and fanaticism, and the idea that like this is to her, like, I think she just kind of recognized the shit she got in, but recognized it in a very, I think to an extent, I believe that there was a wake up call from the fact that, you know, she was injured in the when like people, you know, she got like trampled a little bit and things like that. I shouldn't say a little bit, because that maybe puts it in a kind of minor light, but she got hurt, and it's, I don't know how to, I obviously I described, like, I don't know, I think it was 2 episodes ago, I don't know, about the idea of like forgiveness, or the idea of allowing people to be able to change, and not giving them and giving them the ability to see out a pathway of change. Like in this example, she's already made the effort to say like, hey, we shouldn't be pardoned, essentially. Like, this is not okay, and making that and taking that and being like, no, I'm rejecting the pardon, right? So you can see how she doesn't see it that way. Like, she doesn't see her actions as being like something that she shouldn't face some sort of like punishment for, which is always weird. Actually, I won't go into that. That's way too philosophical. But and I honestly don't know how to describe it best, even that whole top conversation about how we feel about our own punishment and so on. But it's clear that, like, you know, I hope that people have been open to her as an individual on this point. That there hasn't, obviously, I'm sure there are lots of people that are just saying, oh, you know, good for patting yourself on the back. Just don't make, you know, just don't take the piss out of the person for doing something that is good for her to do, even if we're not trying to say that what she did, that, you know, in the large like scaling of things, it's like, we're not saying that like, oh, she's now a very good person, because we're just saying, hey, she recognizes that she did something wrong, and she feels the need to make that more than just saying, you know, to do that more than just saying like, oh, I'm just going to continue going on as I want to because it's easier, or, you know, it allows me kind of the ability to escape and like responsibility and so on. So I'm glad she's done it, and I'm glad that this is a thing that has voice to it. You know, I'm glad that there's a recognition of it. I'm just hoping the reception, which I'm assuming, because this was, I don't know how recent this was, but I hope that the reception has been and will continue to be positive around it, from obviously everyone who isn't part of like the MAGA ideology, who clearly have been very upset with her for. You told me that you knew about her a bit more before, because she's been like doing things over the years, and I just wasn't aware of it.
Yeah. Leading up to it, on social media, she was one of the people posting lots of videos at the time, and her posts were relatively known. And it's one of those things where you look back at it and you go, especially like if you go through the Guardian's article, you know, she pretty much incited, well, she said it's a war, and was very proudly on her way to Washington, D.C. So her footage was also used in her leading up to her arrest and also the arrest of other people. So good old good old self snitching leads the way, and that's how a lot of these guys got caught as well. They snitched on themselves by accident because they thought that they was going to get away with all of this. They thought that they were going to help their one true leader, Donald Trump. And I think the positive aspect I'm taking away from this all is that when it comes to things like brainwashing from a cult-like atmosphere and cult-like background, it is possible to deprogram yourself from this. Case in point, you have like Leah Remini from the Church of Scientology who successfully converted away from it. You have many stories of people from different religious backgrounds who are more hardcore fundamentalists in their viewpoint, pretty much transitioning away from it completely. And this is another one where, given her age and her general profile, you thought that she was a goner, and she has gone, hey, no, I've come back from substance abuse. I've been sober since 1979. I'm 71. I can change my mind, So that is a major positive thing that we should take from it. And there'll be people who'd be like, hey, I can never forgive her and yada. But then I always say this: if you are holding someone to account for the things that they did prior to it, you demand them to change and they change, and then you look at them and say, well, that's not enough. Well, here you have someone who committed an act against her own country, was sentenced for it, did the time for it, was offered a chance to be seen as completely innocent in it, and said, no, I did something wrong. And I don't want people to make that same mistake. If you're still going to go, well, yeah, but you did it in the first place for that, then I would love to see all of the transgressions that you have committed in your life, and that people hold against you forever, because people do get better. And right now, she is doing better.
Yeah, it also, to me, it just completely, if that's your reaction, it completely undermines at least my personal take on what the whole point, or what the major point of any sort of punishment system in place should be for. Because I always think of rehabilitation as always been the thing I care about most. That's always a very difficult subject, because obviously rehabilitated in what way, and is society able to also be rehabilitated as well, because society causes a lot of these issues in people. But the idea of like, hey, when you have like a very cut and dry case of someone does something bad and we know it's bad, can you see how you did something bad? And the idea of like, okay, let's provide someone the ability to come out of this with the ability to engage in society, and engage in society respecting the knowledge they have gained of what they have done. To me, like, that is the main purpose, outside of other reasons for punishment that are perfectly fine as well, but just are not my emphasis, certainly. So I think that you don't have to you don't have to welcome people with open arms. You just have to respect what they're doing. You just have to respect them as a human being and recognize them as a human being, and be willing to, unless you're very close to a murder. I'm not asking you to go and talk to the person, but I'm just saying recognize that someone does something, and we need to be able to allow them back into the fold of, just general existence in life, and not ostracize people and so on from people.
You have to look at who, as well, if we go on the political route of this, the leaders of the Proud Boys have been released as well, and he was sentenced to, I think it was 22 years he was sentenced for, or 18 years, and that's a dangerous person who's just been let out, as well as multiple members of the Proud Boys who've been let out. And these are guys who have incited and will continue to incite hatred against people who are ethnic minorities, who, by the way, Enrique Tarrio is an ethnic minority, the dumb fuck. But hey, these are the things that we will now witness in the next 4 years. And why this is mental health mental health this week, it's quite simple. this stuff is impactful to our mental health. Being brainwashed, being led into a cult, and escaping from a cult is a big, big issue in the world of mental health, and we should be exploring those things. Anything else?
Also, I was going to say, actually, just because we're talking about this in the form of a cult as well, which I'm not saying is bad or wrong or anything, but for kind of things alongside this, just look into discussions people have about Scientology, and I think even some. I don't know. I don't feel comfortable talking about saying Mormonism in the same way, but I know some people have described Mormonism as a cult. But I think most importantly, Scientology is like the most clear one that people talk about. So just look for people's kind of discussions and talks about what it's like to come out of that. And obviously, there's like even more obscure ones that exist. The US apparently has a lot of them. So there are more like obscure forms of this that exist in just kind of all over. So if there's any more kind of interest in, what is it like to be in a cult? How does it feel? What's the kind of experience of you deprogramming? I love that word, which I've heard used in these kind of scenarios, in these discussions. These are interesting topics and probably worth learning about, because I'm not saying that this is the case, but I wouldn't be surprised if her experience as a counselor and also her experience with addiction may have meant that she kind of got round to realizing what she was in at some point. The fact that it happened at the time it did makes sense, because obviously these being kind of like shocked into the prison system and so on probably will make you think about these things more. But I wouldn't be surprised if like her ability to deprogram doesn't come from like a recognized history and a recognition that, oh, this kind of thing exists and I've gone through this process, or I see other people go through this process of trying to, affect themselves and change. And I see, and it allows her the ability to do so herself. I just think if you understand a little bit about how cults work, and if you understand, it's a bit like learning about abuse, right? It does help you to recognize when you're in a toxic environment just by listening to people talk about what it's like to be in those environments. So yeah, just have a look around for stuff like that.
Yeah. Up next, we have ADHD and music. The next two all ADHD based, but we'll go with the lighter one here with ADHD and music. This is I posted the link originally, and then you delved deeper, and I like the delving that you did. So here's a shovel. Dig deeper for us, Joe.
There was like a Vice, I think it was Vice, right, article that said something, but basically was just saying that like, oh, ADHD and music might be good for people with ADHD, which was very unsatisfying for me. But also like the whole topic has made sense to me, and I asked you even about like how you felt about this, and you sort of said yes. And this is something that's kind of at least been I've noticed in lots of people as well, like people who have ADHD, what they tend to be like, or what they tend to enjoy, and so on, when they tend to feel most productive and other sorts of things. So there is what's called a systematic review. Systematic reviews are very important in I'll just read out the name, sorry, just to be clear of this, as that we'll put the link for this. But exploring the intersection of ADHD and music, a systematic review. The systematic review part is really important because a systematic review, for those who don't know, is essentially it collates a bunch of different. It basically brings together a bunch of different experiments that have been done, and it essentially compares results. So the reason why this is important is because so what this is not an experiment on its own, right? Like if you read this and you were looking for, and you see like, oh, there's like a methods bit and a results bit and a discussion and conclusion, and you would think that it all works the same. But like the methods, for example, is how did we find what did we choose to pick in terms of like, articles or journals and things like that. So it's a very, very different style, although there's lots and lots of similarities in terms of like significance and so. Anyway, I'm getting a bit too technical here. The main thing is that by doing this, it does what is really kind of recommended and necessary in science, which is when you have like kind of newer ideas being looked at, that it's easy to have a bunch of different experiments that all kind of say like what part of the elephant is without having any idea about what the elephant actually feels like. If you know the old sort of adage about like the blindfolded or the blind philosophers or whatever you call them, all touching a part of the elephant, like the ear, the trunk, and the tail, and the hide or whatever, and they all come up with some explanation of what the elephant is based upon the one thing that they touch. But the systematic review is basically taking all of that and then making the elephant out of it, or trying to, because they're all such weird and different aspects of the creature. And it's kind of a similar aspect of like, hey, how much of this? But in this case, it's more like, okay, how much of this overlaps? How much of this seems to, contradict one another? What are there reasons in terms of methodology? Are there reasons in terms of X, Y, Z? There seems to be relatively high overlap across different things. And it talks about lots of the limitations. So I won't go over all of them. But it puts in its limitations largely in terms of what experiments it had available to it to be able to use. But this came out very recently. This came out this month. The main two things that it kind of looks at is music, or actually I guess it's free, but it's music, like teaching music and music therapy, and then the aspect of listening to music while doing other things. So this would be you're doing an essay while you're listening to music kind of thing, like the music listening side. And the other side is more like as a therapy, or just teaching music in order, and seeing if there is like kind of an effect over time from that. And it turns out that like overall there seems to be positive correlations. It's not causation by any means or anything like that, which, I mean, you're not necessarily expecting that, but there's definitely kind of a correlation that seems to exist. And in the positive, very much the idea that like, yes, there is a benefit to kind of doing music theory, or like learning how to play musical instruments or something like that, because ADHD has this association with having like problems with temporal processing, essentially with the idea of like being able to difficulties processing short time intervals and beat tracking. This isn't to say, by the way, that any individual with ADHD, if they don't have like difficulty with this, is somehow like not got ADHD or is like a complete out, like this makes this whole thing wrong. It's just to show, like, as in, like, because obviously if you do have training, then you'll obviously be better than even a normal person, potentially. But the idea is that this difficulty in being able to process time the same way means that you have a difficulty, like, the things that a lot of people associate with ADHD of losing track of time, or of finding it difficult to feel like the need for like stimuli and things like that is a very sort of important, like, because you feel like time, you don't know how much time has passed, and you're like kind of struggling around, and so your brain is like really looking for something to immediately fill the space or something like that. This kind of idea means that these sort of characteristically, there seems to be a benefit to just improving your brain's ability to just do those things, to basically like keep an eye on the world around you sensorily through your temporal processing. So that's one thing. The music listening thing also seems to be quite strong. The idea that there's this idea which is I think it's called like I know arousal's in it, but I can't quite remember the other word for it. I'm just having a look. Baseline arousal. There you go. There's kind of like I can't remember if it's arousal theory or like baseline arousal theory or something like that. But it's basically the idea that with a certain amount of stimulus, there's like a certain amount of stimulus that everyone needs in order to be like at their best. So this is, and the idea of best here is to basically say that your brain's in like a rhythm that's good. Some people need nothing and their brain is in the best position during that. In many cases, some people are very like hypersensitive. So even what we would consider like normal stimuli could be like on the upper end, right? Lots of people with autism tend to be hypersensitive in different ways. So, and people with ADHD can be as well. Obviously there's loads of overlap, but we'll go to that. But there's loads of so the idea, for example, of this baseline arousal is like, hey, as long as you have a certain amount of stimuli going on, that tempo that we were kind of referring to earlier, that temporal processing, that feeling of a tempo kind of keeps you going, keeps you in rhythm, keeps you in step, if you know what I mean. So suddenly your productivity and your flow is then kind of hitting that step, and can also explain why to a certain extent, like why certain music might be good for particular people. Just on the base, like if we're going outside of this for a second, might even explain why certain music is preferable in certain situations at the very least. Why someone who might really like something but not want that kind of music in lots of different scenarios, just because there's a certain like rhythm that they're trying to kind of attain without necessarily realizing that it's affecting the way that they feel in their brain. I know that there's been, for example, like there's been lots of like lots of experiments have been done because for shops, for example, because of course though when psychology was becoming like really, really big as like a study and became very much like commercially like involved, the idea of like, oh, can we get customers to buy more? Can we get our workers to work harder? And the idea of having music in the background that like if they played higher frequency music, like if they played music with a higher BPM, that people tend to scan at the checkout more to the rhythm, as a result, and things like that. It's a very kind of like natural phenomenon. So you can see how perhaps if you have issues with that this would then appropriately help you to perform better. And this is interesting because historically the accepted ideas is that people with ADHD just perform better in environments with reduced distractions. But just to quote, our review indicates that listening to music before or during a task can improve performance in a range of domains more effectively than silence. So it's not. So it tends to be this idea that, like, for something like music, for example, which while being a stimuli is a very kind of consistent, recognizable stimuli that kind of makes sense and like fits. I don't know what you would describe it as, but like it fits a flow, if you know what I mean. That distraction or like just pure stimulus in and of itself doesn't. Like if you're in a city, hearing like a beeping car is not doesn't necessarily follow a kind of rhythm, a beat, a feeling. You can't expect it to happen just before it's going to happen without seeing the situation. So when you're just walking around and you hear random stuff, or if you're on a bus and you're going along and you're in a conversation with someone, and then suddenly you hear the announcer, go on and say, the next stop is, I feel bad because I feel like I'm forgetting like what it's like to be in London now, but the next stop is Nag's Head or something. I don't know. And then that's kind of like, even though that's going to happen at some point, it's easy to kind of like lose in the moment where you are and like the time period you're in and so on. And that suddenly comes in. I have friends who, very specifically, I have friends with ADHD who have that problem when they travel, of like being on a train or a bus or something like that and hearing announcements and it bothering them. So I think to me it makes a lot of sense, and like having read over it, it makes a ton of sense in terms of like music therapy. It seems to show significant benefits as well. I would really like to see it because it's a not that there is any like judgment on. I don't have like a hugely strong judgment on like therapies that include like substances. I recognize that there is a lot of good that comes from having substances as a way to like improve things. I think I've had people around me growing up who have felt a bit stronger about that stance, like about a bit more negatively towards substances as a way of helping. And I think that then it makes sense from like a historical perspective. I think now that might be less true. And I think personally, I feel that now with kind of a recognition of of mistakes we've made in the past and so on, that there definitely is like a way in which it can help. But I like the fact that music therapy and just any sort of therapy that does actually show, neurophysiological evidence, like of improving, specific brain regions, enhancing cognitive functions, attention, emotional stability, and also interestingly enough, this was the really interesting thing about the therapy part. The benefits for individuals with ADHD was interesting because in a few, it seems to be that like ADHD, it affects people with ADHD to a degree, and much less so in children that didn't have ADHD. So there actually seems to be kind of this metric where the music therapy is actually sort of filling in for something that perhaps most children don't require, right? So the idea that like actually this is like a very key benefit, even if it did bring benefit to everyone, no one would be necessarily like that shocked if it did help everyone. But the idea that it like almost primarily only helps children without ADHD is quite surprising, right? Not saying that that's the true statement, but like the fact that there are these sort of questions raised is really fascinating. So, but yeah, just the idea that there is a therapy which doesn't require people to have to take substances with potential side effects, and people just generally might feel that they don't want to have anything with substances. Again, I'm not saying that any of these are mutually exclusive anyway, but there are people who prefer just kind of not to do that, or whatever your opinion is, whatever your feeling is. But it's very so I like the fact that I like the positive results of this. I'm not saying that like I have to be very careful. That it shows a positive result in that direction. And I should also say, not all studies reviewed found statistically significant outcomes. I'm literally quoting it here. So I don't want to give the impression that that is purely the case. This is when we then get into some of the issues with the heterogeneity of these of the experiments being used, which basically means that there aren't enough examples of the same kind of experiment, like the same experiment being used like over and over again in multiple occasions, in order to show like, oh, it's still working in every time you do it, rather than just having like lots of different ones that are a bit different, and then you don't have like a proper point of comparison. So yeah, sorry, that was a very long discussion about all of this, but yeah, like I feel positively about some of the findings of this, and certainly the fact that this is a collated evidence from long period of time. It includes lots of stuff from 2024 all the way back to, God, I had the number down, but like back to the 19. It takes in a lot. Basically, it takes in many like years of research, and some of which is like taken with the understanding that at certain points they didn't have certain information, other points they did. Of course, that's the whole point of a systematic review. But yeah, brilliant to see this being done, and the fact that this is very recent. I hope that this continues, and I really would be interested to see the continuation of this, just because I have personally, anyway, anecdotally noticed a lot of this. Does any of this ring to you, as someone who has an ADHD diagnosis, does any of what I have said in recognition of this article kind of feel like right to you, or at the very least feel like something that you would go, oh, I can see that or whatever. I don't know.
Yeah, you went on for a bit, not gonna lie. So there's
Yeah,
a
I
lot
did.
that
Yeah.
there's a lot that came out, but there was never a time to stop. You were a freight train. No one could stop you. And I didn't want to stop you. Yeah, a lot of it does. A lot of it does. It's like, it comes down to what things actually relate and what things are to do with ADHD. So, like, music stimulation is a really key thing, especially the types of music it is as well. Like, I don't think it's an ADHD specific thing because I think other people have it, especially people who are neurotypical, in which they like a song and they play the song on repeat over and over and over again. I have that quite a lot. I know that you have that and you don't have an ADHD diagnosis. So is it a neurodivergent thing or is it a neurotypical thing? I think it's an anybody thing because I know neurotypical people who do that as well. And the reason why I do it anyway is because I normally fixate on a certain part of a song. So then I end up listening to the whole song anyway. And there's a feeling of, I don't know, gratification of hearing that part of the song. Like right now, that song for me is Pine by the band Lastel. I really enjoy the opening bit. I'm not going to sing it, just listen to the song. And there's as a crescendo into like a harmony between the heavy screaming singer and the main vocalist is also the drummer. So then I love hearing that. And that provides me a stimulation that, you effectively always seek. And there's loads of things like Rainbow Kitten Surprises song, Lady Lie has a very long harmony that for about 2.5 months straight, I would listen to that song on repeat. So yeah, a lot of this stuff is very relevant. And I wish that we could do more things with music. Like at the school that I work at, we always have on calming music, and it's meant to be sensory-based music. It is literally just things like it's instrumental style soothing music where it's like hums, and the videos will have like turtles swimming in the ocean, and it's very, very, it's very empty in a way. So it's just like, this is slow music meant to bring you down, meant to make you feel calm, and it drives me up the wall. It actually absolutely drives me up the wall, and I have to put it on quite a lot. And I've actually decided to tweak it now, and I put on lo-fi hip hop beats instead. And I've seen slightly more, like when they're doing things like reading, I've noticed that there's more of a drive to read. When the calming music is on, I think there's a relation with we get to do whatever we want. Because normally we go, oh, put on the calming music, let them have some like free time, whatever. But now there's like a beat to it. There's something more, there's a higher tempo. They actually want to do things. So they want to engage with things. So they want to read, they want to draw. And I've noticed that from other things as well. Like when I'm coaching football, I normally have my little JBL speaker on me. And I treat coaching similar to dancing. So there's like a rhythm to everything you do. And I'm currently using the like mosaic approach to this as well. And to summarize the mosaic approach, it's pretty much the idea that children are the experts of their own lives. Who the fuck are we, like, to tell kids what's best for them? How do you find what's best for them? You ask them. So I've been getting feedback on those methods from the people who we're working with here. And it's like, yeah, they really like the idea of music playing, and they like the fact that my music taste is very varied. So there'll be, there'll be Kendrick Lamar in there. Then there'll be Lastel or In Me. Whether they like it or not, because football has a rhythm tempo to it where a pass will come in, pass, control, touch, pass, control, touch, pass. And there's like a sound. When you hit a ball, there's a sound. So everything sort of loops and connects with their actions. And if things are going well, the music fits in. And it feels like it's orchestrated to perfectly fit in the session that we're doing. If things are disjointed, if things are maybe a little bit scrappy, the music then feels like a distraction because things need to be corrected before we can have that flow. And things like that is important. And I think that the way that we have to move forward with things like music therapy is by doing more of these studies in schools and really, again, using that mosaic approach to figure out whether there's a response to it that is worth us investing money and resources into it. The reality is that this stuff, it seems really cheap outside looking in. It's probably pretty expensive to put together, as individualized therapy is ridiculously hard to come by. So music therapy, how do we tweak that? How do we make that relevant to somebody? How do we make that, like, do we make it a group thing? Do we make it something which, how do people access it? And these are the things that we're going to have to eventually build towards. And I don't know whether we will ever be able to do that now in the next 3 or 4 years, whether it's going to take decades to instill. I'm sure that there's music-based therapy things around now. So I'll probably end up doing some research into that. But to see it become a mainstream thing, that'll be cool to see. I would love to see how it's implemented, you know?
Yeah. This obviously isn't like this isn't like in specific to ADHD, but having spoken about the shops already, like I worked at a place where we had no music. When I worked at Audi, there's no background music there. It was a small shop and it didn't have a sound system in the shop. It just didn't. So there was no music. And I don't think Audi generally does have music anyway. Where I work now does have music, and there is a very qualitative difference between how I feel at work on average versus, you know, and what it can provide. It can also be obviously annoying when they just play Christmas music over and over again. But in terms of the feeling of, like, you know, when the music hits, you know, like that, when it hits, like it hit good, like it does, and it makes such a big difference to the just my own personal experience. So I think just the idea of background music in all forms of, you know, in whether it be in like teaching even or things like that, and the idea of like passive listening can still be good even outside, like whether in therapy or outside of therapy. I think to me, I just can't imagine a world in which it's not helpful. I guess the only thing is determining, like you kind of said, for like distinctions between individuals, and, you know, how do you do it in like a class setting, for example? What do you go for, like, or what would be the not so much what you go for, because obviously you do it, but what I mean is, like, if this started to become like a thing, what would be like the curriculum, if you will, of music that you can play, and like when you should use it, for what kind of activities should you put a certain kind of track on, or something like that. It's interesting though. It is. I think it's an interesting area, no matter what. I'd speak to something very primal about humans in general, if we want to go a bit spiritual about it.
Like, I think that there's a lot to be gained from further research into this stuff. I think there definitely is. It'll be interesting to see what the conclusions that we get. Are we now good to move on to the final thing?
Yeah.
Cool. So we'll stick with the topic of ADHD, and we're speaking about mortality rates, because I'm going to die. The general conclusion from multiple studies that have been collected together is that the life expectancy of people with ADHD, adults specifically, is, well, about, what was the exact figure here? I'm very scared to say it, just in case I'm getting it wrong here.
It was, I believe that let me just actually pick out the thing, because I was on a different bit. It was 6.78 years less in males and 8.64 years less in females.
Okay. So this study effectively is, personally looking at it, it's a very scary study to look at the headline of it. If you're someone who is diagnosed ADHD, especially as an adult, you might think to yourself, well, I guess I'm dying fairly young. And I had that same thing as well. I still kind of do. I can definitely see why it can trigger an emotional response from people. The general idea of it is, however, not to do with the fact that, hey, you have ADHD, you're going to die because you're dopey and you're fucking clumsy and you're stupid. No, it's more along the lines of the fact that people with ADHD tend to not get the same amount of support that a neurotypical person would get with any non-natural condition that they will have or go through in their lives, as well as the fact that there's unmet and very modifiable life circumstances that they really, really, really haven't addressed. So, for example, we spoke about stimulation and the need of stimulation. Well, it comes down to things like this. Someone with ADHD, they'll have certain desires and certain necessities that they'll need to fulfill in order to feel well within themselves. If they can't seek it through safe methods, they'll take risks in order to seek it in other ways. For example, be it things like drugs, legal/illegal drugs, be it things to do with sexual desires and things like that as well, be it legally, be it illegally. And by that, I mean like paying for sex and things like that. Or things along the lines of thrill seeking. So, all of the above for that stuff. It could be just doing dangerous stunts. It could then just be not really paying attention to your own body and your own well-being as well. And the study has come to that conclusion, and it is a scary thing to read. However, this has actually been, I would say, somewhat thoroughly researched, but it highlights more the need to support people with ADHD, especially adults with ADHD, rather than the need to go, oh my goodness, they're lost causes, they're all gonna die. So yeah, I don't know what you like to add to that.
I'd say also, just for anyone who is in any way thinking that this is just to kind of clarify all of this. I mean, this is one in the UK. This is a study of the UK. This is also very recent. The 6.78 years for men. I think the average lifespan is about 80 years or late 70s. So that's almost a 10% decrease in lifespan. Probably about 9% or something like that. I'm not doing the maths. I don't need to. 8.64 years for women, which is actually over 10% of their lifespan drop. That's actually quite significant. At least I was saying this to Alex, that like the fact that, you know, women do live longer, but it's not a proportional amount. It's quite a lot more of an effect for well, I'll say females in this case, but that, you know, the lifespan is normally, you know, is not that distinction, not that big a distinction in the UK. Like, yes, women do tend to live longer, but we're looking at 4 years or even less than 4 years on average. And yet there's like a 2-year difference in the reduction of your lifespan if you have ADHD, if you're diagnosed with ADHD over not. So this is quite a significant effect. This at least seems to say that the effect of ADHD is quite a grand one. Like, we're not talking about like a very minor thing. And of course, to be very clear, you know, ADHD is not causing you, we're not saying, it's not like smoking or anything like that. It's not causing you to live a shorter life. It doesn't work that way. We're saying that having ADHD in our society produces scenarios in which you end up having a shorter lifespan because of many of the things that Alex has already described. So it's kind of like saying like poverty. Like, not having money doesn't kill you. Like, that's not a thing. But not having money means that there's lots of things that then come from it, right? It's not the lack of money itself that does anything, because in a society where that doesn't matter, then it doesn't matter. Obviously, the fact that money we've given it a value and we've created this system around it means that poverty then is a thing. You know, it wouldn't exist in a society that didn't have that kind of problem. So it's in a very similar way, just to kind of clear up where this is not like, oh, people with ADHD, they have a problem with their brain and their brains are killing them or something. No, it's not like that. It's very much like the overlap between an individual with ADHD and growing up with ADHD, developing with ADHD, living their life with ADHD, growing old with ADHD, and the society in which they live in. And again, we're talking about this is in the UK. this is in the UK. So at least for me and Alex, this is this is to us like this is a, this is like, a situation where we know, like, when we're talking about this, that we understand our society that we live in. And so when we're kind of thinking about this, we're thinking about our world. We're not just like, it's sometimes when we talk about like US studies and things like that, it's quite easy to like assume it's exactly the same, but then obviously there are like lots of differences. The fact that
like
we
in
kind
this
of
case,
it's like
sorry,
interesting.
I'll say in this case, like this has been like cross-reference of other studies across different countries. However, again, this UK study is quite landmark in how it's been done. I think it goes without saying, we've been very like study heavy in this episode. It goes without saying that listening to this doesn't change you, for example. So if you felt like you were good, you probably are good. You stay good. What I think this is now representing, what these studies are all showing, though, is that there's a need for support, and that there is a dearth of services in terms of ADHD support. If you wanted to get support of ADHD, you're on a wait list to even be diagnosed. So the waiting list to get support is staggeringly bad. It's to be honest, it's pretty appalling. And we've had multiple governments in charge, both Conservative, both Labour, who has failed to really do anything effectively to support people with ADHD, especially adults with late diagnosis. This is an indictment of the failures of our health system, rather than a failure of you personally with ADHD. There's not much you can really do. If you're fine, you're fine. But what we're looking at and what this study is showing us is that people with conditions in which they are compulsive in their actions, in which they have a lack of, I guess, self-control, and they're very impulsive in the things that they do, they'll get themselves into misadventure, if you will. They'll get themselves into situations in which the chances of not surviving rises. So we now need to look into how we can stop this and how we can support those people. And I think I hope that this is a study that's also used in the current fight to make and decriminalize pretty much all drugs. I'm a very strong proponent of that. I think that, I think our country's going backwards, the fact that we haven't legalized cannabis yet. I think that we're going backwards, the fact that we still arrest people for things like possession. I think that is a dangerous thing. I think that we should stop doing this. I think that we should stop ruining lives over this stuff. I think that we should be looking to support and help recovery and help form a recovery plan for people rather than criminalize them and throw them all away. I'm hoping that these studies are then used as a reference point, as a way to help build a bridge to a better overall life, a better quality of life healthcare service. But I highly doubt it will be. I think that people are going to look at these studies and go, okay, and we're not going to see much more about it. But it's there. If you want to read through it yourself, you definitely can. If you want to have a study through, if you have any thoughts on it as well, it'll be good to hear what people think about this stuff, especially. I just the cynic in me is slowly creeping out. Not about the study itself, but about the effects the study is actually going to have.
We all hope it will have a big impact. And on a positive note, I suppose it is things like this it is studies like these that will bring about the kind of impetus for lots of change, or the impetus for certain groups to make greater demands or big demands around these issues. So I very much agree, especially as this is quite landmark in the way that this study has done this, that I hope it spreads as like that there is this examination will happen elsewhere. And I hope in order to kind of like compare, like to show that this is regardless of society, even that these have impacts, or I should say that like in societies are very similar, that these will have impacts. And yeah, I definitely could see this becoming something, but yeah, the cynicism is obviously you see something like this, and then very little kind of there's very little like progress from this point. But I guess you only need one of these to kind of spark a large movement or a large kind of like push for like bills or whatever. Again, the political environment very much matters for whether or not it's somewhat arbitrary in that sense, or very like random as to like whether or not it gets through to those moments. But these will exist for a while, and there'll be people coming back to this. Hopefully this will get hopefully that people will agree that this is useful, and they'll use this in other studies that they've made, and at least it'll push like more experimentation and stuff around it. So hopefully
we'll find out. The only way to find out is to get in a fucking spaceship and go to the future. In the meantime, we'll wait patiently and see what happens from there. It's now time for the journal. This is Old School Silly Wales, where we discuss our lives. So if you're just here for the mental health this week, you're like, I don't give a fuck what these motherfuckers say, you can leave now, man. It's all good. We'll take the hit on the YouTube analytics. It's all good. My heart can only break once, and it's already broken. So, Jesus Christ.
You want to go first then?
I don't know if I do, but I feel like
that.
Who's got the saddest thing, you or me? I think it's you.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, you go.
Okay. I think I titled it more, maybe like I titled it dramatically because I wanted to, but I have had a pretty shitty last few days, and it's really kind of brought into focus like this the kind of up and down, the roller coaster that exists. If you asked me at the beginning of this week what I thought this week would be like, I would have been very positive and optimistic about it. The first few days were great. And even on Thursday, which is on Friday, when this when the shit started going down, I would have gone to sleep Thursday evening feeling fine. My work week was about to start and I still would have been like, yeah, it's all good. It's all good. And then I happened to apparently I didn't plug my phone in, or something happened like that, and it completely and it just meant my phone ran out of charge, so I didn't wake up on time, and I woke up late, and I ended up kind of going into work late, which really sucked. I don't know why, but just like it really kind of like put me down in that respect. But then kind of in all seriousness, like that wasn't really like the major thing. The reality was that work was shit. So that first thing happened, I felt bad, but then it kind of really affected the feeling of how my personal benefit to society, or my personal like sense of who I am, my sense of value of myself or whatever. And then it ended up being that, the last 3 days have been the shittest days at work for a long time. Probably like the first week of January was decently bad, but this is probably like but that was because of like a kind of illness thing of like my ear, right, and pain and all that. And I just had the last few days just felt absolutely awful, really shit at work. It's unfortunate. We'd been making lots of like kind of positive strides in terms of things were going well. Stuff was being done when it needed to be, and it meant that my work could at least be done properly. And it meant that, I got kind of used to, if that makes sense, to actually like getting the job done and getting it done on time, and like feeling and feeling like we had a system running that worked. I think that genuinely got me it got me in a really bad mood to kind of find it just completely fall apart. And I mean, there were still issues, but we managed to get stuff done. And the fact that now we've lost even that bit and the old issues still haven't been fixed really did get me down. So I sort of titled this around the idea of like facing challenges in a low mood. I think the reflection on this period, because again, this is only a very short period that I can describe, my reflection came when I realized that it wasn't just that shit's been bad at work or whatever, because I realized that there are so many times where shit's bad at work and it really doesn't bother me. And it, and all of this, it's the fact that, yes, this is, I've described it already that like I've been having SAD this month and I've been experiencing it. But like I said, like the last 2 weeks and period of time have actually felt pretty good, like despite that. And it's facing kind of like stressful challenges or like things that make your life harder. It's like the threshold for what like causes you the most, like causes you to go into spirals, at least for me, is much like lower during a period of like, when I might have like SAD, like at this point and going into February. Even though the days are getting longer, it's like I've lived long enough in the darkness now that it's really getting on my sort of ability to like mentally like kind of get myself in order. And as when things are going well, I've said this like multiple times over like the entirety of this podcast, like when things are going well, it feels kind of easy. And when it doesn't go well, suddenly everything falls out of whack. Like everything that I wanted to do. I've been wanting to get my haircut done for essentially over a month now. And I literally have not done it because I cannot get myself organized to do anything. I cannot get myself like set up for that. And when things are going well at work, I at least think to myself, okay, well, I'm just getting by like with this. The SAD is like not completely fucking me up. The SAD isn't like taking me out, for good in the way that it has recently, where I've been avoidant and so on. And now, but like, and it's like, okay, I can afford not to get my hair cut for a little bit. It's okay. I don't mind too much, whatever. But I can see why in previous years in my life, why it became so difficult, because when I didn't have certain things to rely on and when I didn't have the senses I do now, or like the experiences I have now, or the behaviors that I'm trying to keep to. And when I was doing things that also helped me, like that also helped in making me feel even worse, even though it felt in the moment like it was doing something good for me and so on, that all of these things just amount to the fact that suddenly, these difficult moments become the perfect, like, cesspools, if you will, for the kind of negative, self-destructive behavior that I have partaken in and that many people do. So it's not like so that's been my like kind of me trying to work through this and kind of philosophize about this a little bit or whatever, or like analyze this. This will lead into the recommendations later. But it's been like very. It's been a lot of like kind of just me stuck in my head like so much, and within such a small period of time that it's actually shocking that it's only been as like it's technically been like less than 3 days of time, and to me that's actually phenomenal. Like that it's technically less than 3 days of less than 72 hours, I guess would be the right way of saying it, since it began, because it feels like it's been a week. So yeah, that's me. Nothing to really like add beyond that, more that other than just I know that this will eventually end, and I'm looking forward to that happening over the next few days, and I will try my best to kind of like make that happen. I'll try my best to actually act in ways that will hopefully reduce it. And even thinking about when I spoke to you earlier and you said "love you" on the phone, and me just have literally I was stressing so much at work today, and then I remembered the conversation, you saying that, and thinking, okay, it doesn't matter, it's okay, and it's the only thing that stopped me from like, I don't know, running over a small child with my trolley or something like that. But I speak for myself. I do not speak for Tesco legally. Just want to say that. Anyway,
But I speak for Tesco. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's been like a I don't know, man. I think I'm in a state where like it's things never feel like they're going well until I look back and go, hey, it's not that bad. I don't really have that time to have that moment of self-reflection. Everything is it's effectively like I'm in the corner of a boxing ring and life is just a really good boxer continuously throwing punches. I'm just slipping and ducking every single punch. But I'm well aware that eventually one of them shots is going to connect and hit. That is how. That's also how sparring went as well. Funny enough. And it's like I say that while also acknowledging the fact that's the best I've ever looked or performed in sparring. It was this past Friday, just Friday gone. And we're recording this on Sunday night, and we're doing a very late episode, by the way. It's the latest we've ever recorded an episode. It's 11:15. And neither of us has worked tomorrow, but I'm still remembering Muay Thai on Friday, in which I felt good, and I think I looked good, and I actually like felt like I was getting good at this shit. Even sparred with my coach, and I said like, "Hey, any feedback?" Which must annoy people because I'm always asking for things to do better, and I know I sound like a 17-year-old youth footballer when I do it. You wouldn't think I'm 27, but like I'm older. I want to fight soon. I need to get to a certain level, so I have to keep improving every single time I go to a session. There's an element of pressure on myself, but I have to have that pressure. That is just the reality of the situation that I'm in. And it's super, super easy to lose track of that and lose focus of that and lose focus of the fact that you're having fun as well. But hearing my coach say, good, and that was it. Yeah, that's a very, I'll say it's a very big thumbs up that I wasn't expecting to get, and we'll take it. It's a lot. There's a lot of like, it's very difficult to I don't even discuss Muay Thai properly with people because everyone hates my mindset when it comes to things like competition and things like that. It's like, hey, I'm probably going to lose. You can't say you're going to lose. Shut the fuck up. I can say whatever the fuck I want. Like, like, if you have that mindset, then you're definitely going to lose. Yeah, sure. Like, it's very difficult to have people hypothesize about your mindset of a possible fight that may or may not ever happen down the road. And already people are experts in sports psychology. And if anyone's going to be expert in sports psychology, it's probably going to be me, given what I'm studying,
Yeah.
So it's quite funny hearing like people be like, well, if your mindset is like, I'm telling you right now, you can get yourself up in the morning for the things that you love so much and you say you love so much. Like, you say you love football, but you can't even get up to play football in the morning, man. Come on. Like, it's I get it. There's a trope in the world which says if you love something and you want to be good at something, you have to think positively about something. I'm here to tell you right now that I think for some people, that's just straight up bullshit, If you go in something with the objective of going, hey, I want to win, but I also realize that I might not win this one, I think you end up leaving knowing full well that if you do lose, hey, you're mentally prepared for the heartbreak that comes with it. It's still going to suck. You're still going to hate yourself, but you were aware of the risks and you're not going to suffer that ego death that we see sports stars suffer when they have a big defeat in which their whole world shatters around them. Like, there's something commendable about combat sport athletes who get completely starched, I mean like KO'd, and they're able to get up and go, yeah, the other guy won. I was shit. I thought I tried my best. Or I did try my best, but I was just second best, and that's okay. It's super commendable to be able to do that. And it's wild when you think about the fact that there's people who have never gotten in a ring, never gotten even close to, and the first thing that they think about is, well, if you had just done this, nah. Sometimes you gotta come up against a motherfucker who is just like Ultra Instinct Goku, and that is A-okay. You know?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of I don't even I think outside of the show, I don't think I've actually mentioned Muay Thai to anybody for that very reason, because you end up getting the, oh, but what about like CTE and all that stuff? Well, you know, I think when it comes to concussive trauma, I think I'll be okay. You know, I think I'm going to be okay. But how do you know? Everyone's a fucking expert. Like, come on. What I now do, I say, hey, we should do some pads. And the first thing that I get back is, oh, I don't want to get hit in the head. And that is the measuring stick. If I say, let's do some pads, and you say you don't want to get hit in the head, that's why I know you don't know what's going on. As when you're doing pad work, I'm holding things for you to hit. So that is a good way for me to de-stress when I'm talking to certain people, because that way I go, hey, I realize, oh, just like kids, adults can say the darnest things, and that's okay.
I like that a form of de-stress is of de-stressing is finding an opportunity to dismiss someone through asking them something.
Exactly.
And just having a terrible response. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Like, I look at it like this, okay? You deal with like a really angry guy who's like a racist, and you like he's there saying, "You fucking nigger this, you fucking nigger that," and then like you want to hit him, and then he goes, "I remember back in the 60s, we used to fucking try and kill you, fucking," and he's stumbling over his words. You look at him and you start to realize, shit, he's a really bad guy, but he could barely speak the language he's fighting so hard to protect. And he can barely function in the country that he's apparently willing to die for in the eyes of being a patriot and in the guise of being a patriot. And you end up just feeling sorry for them. And you end up just thinking to yourself, do you know what? Yeah, you've called me awful names, but at least when I wake up in the morning, I am not you. And then you just go on with your day.
I liked so much of what you said. I loved it.
Yeah. Now to overanalyze an advert. Let's do that. So I saw the Skittles advert, the one in which the guy touches everything and it turns into Skittles. Great advert. I'll link it in the description below.
It's so iconic.
Now I feel like there's probably thousands of essay YouTubers who've delved into this. I haven't seen any of their videos, but I feel like I want to do it anyway. Okay? I don't know why. I saw that advert and he touched the table in frustration. He slammed on the table and it fell apart. And for some reason, I fell apart too. I turned into Skittles. I am a Skittle. Okay? I think that advert brought out something in me of the idea that everything I touch turns to shit. And the general concept of whatever you are next to breaks and it deforms and it falls and it fails. And the constant idea that you bring failure to people. And the idea of Skittles being something is like, hey, that's not entirely true. Look, people are enjoying what you do. But you're not seeing the overall gift because you see all the negative effects of it. And you only live the negative effects. You only feel the negative effects, but you don't really get a chance to sit back and go, hey, there's people eating my fucking Skittles. And like, they're happy enough. And it's like, what else? Like, what is life, you know? You start asking yourself these questions. Like the philosophy bros, that's what we are now. You start asking yourself the questions of, hey, you know, how bad is life really? And are we doing things and are people around us happy that we exist? And do they want us to keep existing? And you start to think to yourself, yeah, do you know what? People smile when I walk into a room. People are happy, you know? People, when you do something nice for somebody, people are really reciprocative. You give you a hug. You're not a total failure, you know? You're not. But then reality hit me and I realized this is just a fucking Skittles advert. And it's just capitalist adverts that work and make you feel something. So kudos to Skittles. Because one, top tier, S tier level sweet, by the way. Like, we're talking S tier level Skittles. If there's if we're going to have to do like a tier list for that, Skittles number one. The best. So, good.
I genuinely can't remember the last time I had a Skittle. It kind of saddens me to think about this, actually. I genuinely don't remember.
The system, Joe.
That's the way out of the system, it's Skittles.
Yeah.
Become
you
the Skittle
work in
man.
a supermarket. You work in a very big supermarket. You can have Skittles.
Yeah, I actually don't know if there's anything in them that I would choose not to have, but I guess I could make them as what do you call it? I guess I could choose to ignore that for a second. But yeah, I'm just thinking about that whole ad, and I think that one of the reasons why it's so good is just how unlike an ad it is, because it doesn't even necessarily seem to indicate like a kind of positive association with the product. You know what I mean? Like just the idea of like this Midas touched man, like unable to touch anything without like it turning into Skittles in his hands, and it's like, wow. And then that's it. That's literally the whole concept of it. And I love the idea of I just love the idea that you brought up about the idea of like kind of things seeming to break apart in your hands, but there being kind of like positive aspects to what you do because people want to eat the Skittles you make. But yeah, as you spoke about with like the with like, you know, when you say good things to each other and things like that, like I think the memories of like positive affirmation or the memories of love and the memories of that you can keep around of people, like it's really like the biggest thing I've been working on since we started this podcast. I think is trying to keep in my head like a list of things that is associated with me that other people have given. And like I think I have a pretty strong one with my mum now, for example. And I think I think about like me and my brother's interactions with each other a lot when I'm trying to remember how he is. I try to think of my niece a lot. My two nieces now, like a lot when I think about this as well. And like these kind of just like forms of connection with other people and so on, and like trying to and using them essentially as like ways to ground yourself, you know, like recognizing that you aren't like kind of this like you aren't this dandelion seed, you know, in the wind just being blown wherever the fuck it takes you in your emotional turmoil, but rather that you are, you know, attached to something quite physically strong and you're not just going to be taken away so easily.
Yeah.
Speaking of fucking philosophy, oh, shall we recommend each other?
Yeah, it's time for recommendation station. Who's first on the run sheet? I think it's you.
Yeah, it also fits with our philosophical the sort of musings we've been having. So yeah, for the last few days, what's actually helped me come out of it a lot, and what gave me the boost today, even though fucking today was also bad. It's very bad, very busy. I have been listening / watching. There is a podcast that I could have been listening to rather than watching on YouTube, but you know, I watched all the YouTube stuff before kind of recognizing that. Alex O'Connor, I think I've referenced him before. On YouTube, he would be called Alex O'Connor. Anyone that's ever listened to a guy called Cosmic Skeptic, it's the same person. Alex J. O'Connor is his full name, but I think he's Alex O'Connor on YouTube. And essentially just a philosophy guy, pretty much. Like, it goes beyond that to a certain extent. He's had, like, his podcast Within Reason is the major kind of, like, thing he does, like, regularly. Even though you can listen to it as a podcast, I do recommend watching it as a YouTube thing as well, because certainly now, like, this set is nice. There's a lot of work that goes into the editing of it, in just like the cuts back and forth between the two people, and the environment is very nice to look at. And I think most importantly of all, like, I find that because it's very easy for me to say, watch someone talk about philosophy or whatever, and immediately people go, oh no, because we all have experienced like the shitty creators, I think, like that. I think Alex O'Connor might be like superbly unique in that he, I think, is one of the only people who who I think goes sort of out of his way to not be one of those shitheads. And importantly, is actually it like works very much in the opposite way. I can't vouch for all of the content that has ever existed in relation to Alex O'Connor and Cosmic Skeptic. I used to watch stuff that he, years and years and years ago when he started out, and it's different content to the way it is now, largely. So yeah, there's some differences, but I think like nowadays, like especially if you go onto Within Reason, it's very good. Rainn Wilson, who I think is Dwight from The Office. I didn't really know about I've never watched The American Office, so I'm not like, I don't really know much about it, but I recognize the old picture and the thumbnail on the YouTube video. Rainn Wilson, he has a episode with Rainn Wilson. I think it's the 90th episode, or no, maybe not 90th. I thought it was 90th. And Rainn Wilson had lots to say about like spirituality and his relationship to God and other sorts of things, which I thought was really, and just the relationship and the idea of God and things like that, which was fascinating. I should add to all of this that I personally find incredible benefit and enjoyment out of philosophical musing. I think there's probably a calling that I've missed somewhere in there, but on top of that, I am someone who I tend to find that like looking at the bigger picture of these topics, kind of the overview effect, as Neil deGrasse Tyson put it in a Within Reason episode that he was on, the overview effect of like, going out into space, seeing Earth and all of this sort of stuff. When you kind of bring out the bigger picture, it does help you, at least in my mind, talk about these things really helps me to kind of like really not be so bothered by like kind of the little feelings and that I'm having that bother me the most, when I get to kind of both think about something that I find intellectually stimulating, but at the same time sort of problems and ideas and concepts that actually allow me to like kind of broaden perspective and think about things in unique ways, and also unravels reality in a way that I find quite like manifestly enjoyable. And yeah, I think no matter who you are, I think you can enjoy the content, even if it's just specific episodes. So I'd really recommend the Within Reason podcast / Alex O'Connor. I would particularly recommend also his episodes, the 2 episodes he's done with Unsolicited Advice, who is another philosophy YouTuber who I also really like. He reminds me a little bit of my cousin, just in kind of his mannerisms. But otherwise, he's I find him to be really good, and I like his content as well. So, but yeah, there's 2 episodes that he has been on the Within Reason podcast about. I think the first one's about nihilism, which was actually much more fascinating than I expected. And then the other one was like questions atheists can't answer, which was actually a really interesting whole thing. That's quite dry and very philosophically heavy, so I wouldn't be like shocked if people wouldn't like those episodes. But like, you can go to less like really specific philosophy, like kind of rabbit holes if you want to with other ones. I think the Rainn Wilson one, for example, would be a very, really good one if you're starting out and just kind of interested in what it looks like. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I've actually listened to an episode before. I need to actually get back into it. Or just give another listen a try. I can't speak English today. Give another episode a try.
Yeah, I just pick and choose which episodes I like. I think I might go through and actually listen to everything, but I honestly think that's perfectly fine because the podcast is designed that way.
Yeah. All right, my one is the Ultimate Self-Defense Championship. There's already been a season 1. Pretty much what it is they have mixed martial artists or self-defense practitioners from all around the world converge in Sydney, Australia, to partake in different challenges in the realm of self-defense. For example, you're on a bus and someone tries to attack you. How do you respond to that? You're in a bar and your mate is a bit on the crazy side, he's drunk, he's attacking people, how do you respond to that in the realm of self-defense? You're being chased by like 5 guys trying to kill you, how do you hide? And things like that. It's a really fun concept of a show. Season 1 was really good. Season 2 has come out and has already finished as well. So you have a lot to binge watch if you want to. It is really fun. They incorporate pretty well-known YouTubers as well. So Jeff Chan, if you know his like YouTube channel, he's known for sparring with people. He's former mixed martial arts fighter with one championship. Jesse Enkamp, who is a pretty well-known YouTuber in terms of things like karate and things like that. Last season had Sensei Seth, Icy Mike, guys like that. It's fun. It is really fun. So enjoy it. If you care about combat sports or care about self-defense, and you care about wanting to learn about this stuff as well. As all these guys have different backgrounds as well. There's a Shaolin monk. There's also a normal, regular truck driver called Craig, who's there. And he's there literally to show, hey, normal people can do this stuff as well. And how does he compare to elite level trained athletes or practitioners of certain combat sports and things like that? So yeah, that's that.
Cool.
With that, we're going to take 2 steps to the rear and get out of here. No way, this episode's nearly 2 hours long. What the fuck? Jesus Christ.
No, it's rounded up, don't worry.
That'd be. We're in the wind. See ya.
Happy Year of the Snake. In a few days.